So the first thing to maybe consider when we talk about what is a makerspace is a little bit about the history of makerspaces. So a lot of times when people think about makerspaces, they have a certain idea in their heads, and that idea that they have, a lot of times that's come from this concept that MIT created called the Fab Lab. And in a Fab Lab, they have a bunch of really high-tech tools that they use in their Fab Lab. So they'll recommend that people have like a 3D printer, that they'll have a laser cutter for cutting either wood or cardboard, some CNC machines, a vinyl cutter, stuff like that. Those really kind of big, expensive, high-tech tools. And those are totally great things to have in a makerspace, but really a makerspace doesn't have to have those high-tech, crazy tools. It can be a pretty low-tech space, or a blend of high-tech and low-tech if that's what you're interested in. So a makerspace is really a place where kids can explore, where they can engineer, where they can tinker, invent, and play purposefully. So you give them a project to do and they can kind of play and tinker on that project there. So for example, in our makerspace, this is our live stream learning studio, but it's also a functional makerspace. We have a pegboard back here, simple little pegboard. We painted it blue, BirdBrain blue, because we can't help ourselves. But we've just got some really simple craft tools hanging out on this pegboard. We've got some scissors, some tape. We've got a hot glue gun, which is really great. That I love using hot glue. You can actually use hot glue with the Hummingbird kit. Put it right onto a motor, and when you're done, you just peel the hot glue off, put your motor back in the kit, and use it over again. Rulers, screwdrivers, pretty basic sort of crafty stuff. But then under here, we've got some consumable craft supplies. So got this little 6 by 6 inch box full of pipe cleaners. You can have those in your makerspace. Over here I've got some straws, some paper clips, some foam, got some ping pong balls, craft sticks, some Velcro, things like that. Those are all valid things to have in a makerspace. And in fact, we found that having those, using those things with creative robotics was a really powerful way to engage a wider variety of students in coding and robotics. And so when you think about a makerspace, like I said, can be low tech, can have a lot of markers and paper and glue and stuff for engineering, or it can be that more high tech space and have those big sort of expensive, more computer science-y, more industrial tools as well. So it depends what you want your makerspace to be. If you've got a high school makerspace and you want the focus to be on industry, on the future of work, on Industry 4.0 and manufacturing, if that's what you want to be preparing students to do there, you might want some of those big, more expensive tools. If you've got a makerspace where you want the emphasis to be on creativity and engineering and problem solving and things like that, you might want something that blends a little bit more high-tech and low-tech stuff. And I think that I trend towards the more crafty things because of my background in after-school robotics, but you can really make a makerspace into whatever you need it to be. So let me set up one thing here real quick. Kind of got a pile of all kinds of things ready to go. So when you think about a makerspace that you want to blend some high-tech and low-tech things, I think the Hummingbird is a really good way to do that. Because, oh, let me zoom out just a skosh. It's a little close. There we go. So the Hummingbird is a really good tool for blending high-tech and low-tech things. So if you open up your kit, you'll see that inside we've got some space for a Hummingbird and a microbit, like that. We've got a battery pack in there. We've got some spaces for some sensors in there, like so, like so. Got some spots for some sensors, some motors, stuff like that. But, well, what is all that stuff? And really, what is a robot? I think is a valid question to start with, because there are a lot of different robotics tools out there. What is a Hummingbird? Well, a robot in general is something that senses, thinks, and acts. So when we say sensing, that means interacting with the environment somehow. So in your Hummingbird kit, it comes with 2 or 4 different types of sensors. So there's a sound sensor here. This one's a distance sensor. This one's a light sensor. and this one's a dial sensor. And what those do is they just generate data. They generate a number. And well, what do you do with that number? Well, you put it into the brain. You've got your thinking part, and that's the Hummingbird and the microbit. And I'll talk a little bit more about what the difference is between those, but that's where the thinking happens in the Hummingbird Robotics Kit. And then the acting, well, in the Hummingbird Robotics Kit, that's just lights or motors. And so we included the components of those things. A lot of robotics tools out there sort of like take these components and they house them in some kind of a plastic shell or in some kind of a body or something like that. Those components, you can't really decide what you want to do with them. It's already an arm. It's already a face, something like that. But because we've broken those components out into their individual pieces, you can use those to make whatever you want to make. So you can make something like this arm up here. That project was invented by a high school health teacher. He was teaching his students about muscles and bones. And so what they did is each group had a different joint that they had to design and build. They had to label all the bones, they had to label all the muscles, and they had to have one motor. If I bring this down just a little lower, there we go, you can see it a little bit better. There's just one motor that's controlling the bicep and the tricep. And so they were also learning about how muscles work in combination, they work in pairs. And so when the bicep is small, the tricep is long, and vice versa. So they were really deeply engaging in biology and in this teacher's health content by making creative robotics and making creative robots for themselves. So now I'd really love to talk about why craft robotics, why making robots out of craft supplies is a really unique and interesting way to approach what you could do in a makerspace, or really to approach robotics. So the Hummingbird, when it was originally designed, it came out of Carnegie Mellon University. And so they were, the reason that it came to be was that Tom Lowers, who started BirdBrain Technologies, he was a grad student at the time, and he had a research question in mind. And that question was, how do we engage more girls in coding? So he came at this from a coding place, not necessarily an engineering place, from a coding place. And they tried manipulating a bunch of different variables around robotics and coding and things like that. And they found that there were 3 factors that deeply influenced how girls engaged in coding. And 3 things that if you adjusted these things, it would really up girls' engagement in coding. So the first one was to make it physical, meaning take the code off of the screen and put it in the physical world. Don't just control something on the screen with something on the screen. Control something in the world with something on the screen. So that means robotics. So robotics was the first tip. The second tip was to give students meaningful creative choices in what they were able to do. So do you want your robot to be pink? It's not actually a meaningful creative choice for a lot of girls. It's great to have that option, but like that's not a meaningful creative choice. But do you want to do an elbow or a knee? If we're doing a robot petting zoo animal, what animal do you want to make? How will it move? What sensor will you put on it, and how will that sensor trigger the movements of your robot? Those are meaningful creative choices. So that was the second factor. And then the third factor that really affected this was the actual craft supplies that you used. It mattered to girls, and we've found over and over again that it matters to all kinds of students who are underengaged in STEM and STEAM learning. It matters what craft supplies you choose to use. Using stuff that they've not only seen, but that they're also actually familiar with and that are friendly to them, that really mattered. So for example, this guy right here, if I turn him on, this is a robotic hand, very cool, but it's made out of straws and friendship bracelet string. And if there is one thing that 7th grade girls know how to work, it's friendship bracelet string. So let me scooch this off to the side, and I'll go back to this view here so we can actually take a look inside. So here's the robot working. You can see we've got some straws here. They're hot glued onto some cardboard. There's string going up through the straws. But let's take a look inside and see how this works. These are just motors, and I've hot glued some craft sticks onto the ends of them to give them a little wider radius so they can pull a little harder. but then the motors are pulling on the string, and the string is pulling on the fingers. So when you think about what students are you trying to reach with your makerspace or with your robotics or with your coding, and what's familiar to them, what's friendly to them, what do they know how to use, and how can you incorporate that into what you're asking them to make, into the projects that you're encouraging them to do. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Hummingbird Robotics Kit then. I'll switch this view around again. And let's take a look at what we've got. So we've got the Hummingbird, got the microbit, and I'll talk a little bit about the difference between the two of those. You would need a USB cord, which comes in your kit. You need a battery pack. So the battery pack just takes like 4 AA batteries, and you can use rechargeable ones if you want or not. And you need this little terminal tool, basically a poke and stick terminal tool there. So let me talk about the differences between the Hummingbird and the microbit a little bit. So the microbit, this right here, is a really powerful little computer science tool. I don't know if you've heard about this before, but it's a type of microcontroller. Other types of microcontrollers are like Arduinos. That's a type of microcontroller. Your computer has a microcontroller in it. But the microbit, if I turn it over, was actually invented by, I don't know if you can see that, but it says BBC. This was invented by the BBC Foundation. And it was invented for teachers to really use in classrooms. Whereas an Arduino was invented about 10, 15 years ago, and that was invented for like hobbyists to be able to sort of tinker around in their basements. But teachers don't have that kind of time to tinker around, and if you attach things to an Arduino wrong, you can like blow out the board and then it's broken and you can't use it anymore. And like, we're working with 3rd graders and we don't have the resources to blow up a board and feel good about our day, right? So this was invented for teachers to be able to tinker with it, and for students to be able to tinker with it. So it's got these A and B buttons that you can use as a kind of input. These little dots here, those are actually LEDs. That's a 5x5 LED display. So you can get words to scroll across or draw pictures on it, things like that. And then these gold things on the bottom, those are ports. So if you wanted to attach an LED or a motor or something, you could do that, but there's actually only 4 ports. And if you want to do it, like if you want to attach a motor, you've got to put like a shield in between the two so that you don't blow out the board. And it gets a little finicky really quickly. So what we did with the Hummingbird is we made it so you could just snap your microbit right into the Hummingbird. And now instead of just 4 ports, now you've got 2 tricolor LED ports, 1 and 2. You've got 3 single color LED ports. You've got 4 motor ports. And you've got 3 sensor ports that you can plug all of those things in at the same time. So now, instead of just 4 things, you can do 12 things all at once on the same project. And the way that these things connect, which I'm going to show you in a minute, the way that these things connect is really simple and really secure. So like if you're using alligator clips, if you bump your project, like, oh, it can fall off, and like it's really like frustrating when it's like, I had it perfect and then I moved it, right? So the way that these connect is a little bit easier. And actually, the Microbit Foundation says that we are one of their favorite breakout boards for their stuff. So I'm going to zoom in on my camera just a skosh so you can see a little better. So I'm going to show you how to plug in an LED and how to program with your Hummingbird. So I'm going to snag, here are my single color LEDs. Your kit comes with 3 different colors. It comes with red and green and blue. Nope, that's not true. Red and green and yellow. And so I'm going to pick my favorite color, which today, as it turns out, is green. So this LED, it's got a green wire and a black wire. And so here's where I'm going to plug it in. See where it says LEDs 1, 2, and 3? Those are 3 different ports. And so we've got a positive and a negative right there. So your black wire is always the ground wire, which means it's got the negative symbol next to it. And your other color, whether it's red or yellow or green, is going to go in the positive. So here's how you attach it. You can use your terminal tool if you want. You push down the button, insert the wire, and let it up. Push down the button, insert the wire, and let it up like that. And now it's really securely attached. I can tug on that thing and it's not coming out, which is great. I'm also going to attach my battery pack and plug that guy in and switch it on. And what I've done is I've actually put my, my Hummingbird into Bluetooth mode. And so that's so that I can use an iPad to program with it. So if you've got a Hummingbird, it can work with a laptop, whether it's Windows or Mac. It can work with a Chromebook, of all different kinds of Chromebooks. And it can work with a tablet, whether that's like a Kindle Fire tablet or an iPad or even like a smartphone. It can work with any of those devices. So whatever you've got in your school, we can work with that. I'm going to show it off with the iPad today just because I really like that connection and so that I can show you my screen really easily with that. So I'm going to zoom out here a little bit and show you my iPad. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to connect and to program a blinking light with an iPad. Cool. So here's my iPad screen. Great. There's a free app that you would use if you're using an iPad. It's called Bird Blocks with an X on it. You could actually put this on your phone or on your iPad right now if you wanted to. Even though you don't have a Hummingbird, you could like follow along if you wanted to do that. I'm going to zoom in just a skosh so you can see a little bit better. Okay, there we go. So here's my iPad. I'm going to open this Bird Blocks app. And I'm going to use that to wirelessly connect to my Hummingbird. I'm going to make a new program, and I'm going to call it Idea. Thanks, Idea. All right. Oh, there's already one there because I was teaching there this summer, so I'm going to call it Idea 2. All right. So in Bird Blocks, just to talk about that a little bit, now I don't know how many of you guys have done any coding before, but I'll tell you, when I first started coding, the way that I was introduced to coding was I was teaching this after school program. So my background, I was a middle school English teacher for 7th and 8th grade, and then I was teaching this after school program for girls. And my administrator came to me and said, by the way, at your after school program next week, you will be doing robotics. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to do that. Is there a training you're going to send me to? And she said, nope, there's the internet. Okay, cool. I can do this. I'm a very smart and driven woman. I can do this. And she said, oh yeah, and there's coding involved. And I was like, I'm not a coder. I'm an English teacher. So anyway, I was really intimidated that first year. This was about 5 years ago. And I just sort of like taught myself. That first year especially, I was working with 4th graders. That was my age group of my girls. And that first year, I don't know if anybody here has used code.org before as a platform. It's a really cool free resource. You can do these great like hour of code lessons. And they call teachers, not teachers, they call them lead learners. I really like that framing for teachers, and it felt very, very true for me as that first year teacher teaching coding. They'd say, Miss Kelsey, how do you do this? And I would go, you know, babe, I don't know. Let's try that out together. But if you've never coded before, it's actually way friendlier than I thought it would be when I started. So most block-based coding languages look something like this. There's different folders of blocks, and there's different colors, and there's different shapes of blocks. And those colors and shapes mean something, which is actually pretty great because humans are really good at colors and shapes. So we get to put that to use. And so the way that these things work is you would like drag out a block. We can zoom in so you can see this block. You drag out a block, and then you kind of like snap other blocks together, and they end up making an algorithm or a long script of blocks. And so that's what we're going to do, but we're going to do that with robotics blocks. So if I scooch this guy over just a little bit, I'm going to actually put my Hummingbird there. I don't know if you can see the letters that are flashing on there, but the way I'm going to connect to my Hummingbird wirelessly is I'm going to go to this connect button. I'm going to say connect device, and then it's going to search for hummingbirds and Bluetooth devices in the area. So this one says FSC, which means floppy sky chicken. Isn't that great? They get random names from the warehouse. So FSC. So I'm going to connect to that one, and when I do, I don't know if you could hear it, but it went ba-da-da-da. That means it's connected. Great. So I'm going to kind of put that over here, and I'm going to put my LED right there so you can see it blinking. So now if I go into the blue robots blocks, now there's a bunch of Hummingbird blocks that have appeared. So I zoomed in a little bit so you can see them. I'll zoom in a little bit here as well so you can see a little better. All right. So we've got these different kinds of blocks here on the screen, and I'm going to start with the one that is a single LED block. So it says bit LED 1 at 0%. So that means Hummingbird bit, that's the type of Hummingbird that we're using. LED, so a single LED, not a tri-LED, but just a single LED, 1 is the port that it's plugged into, so we are plugged into port 1, and 0% is the brightness. So what percentage do you think we would need to set that to get our light to turn on all the way? I wonder. 100%. So if I type in there 100 and then a check mark, nothing's happening quite yet, and that's because I just need to click the block to run it. So if I click it, ta-da, look at there. My green LED came on. And that happened instantly because it's got that instant and active Bluetooth connection. So I really like using iPads for that because kids these days, can't believe I said that. Anyway, students these days are really native tablet users and touch screen users. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I have a friend's kid who did this on a picture once because they were trying to zoom in on the picture. So they really know how to use tablets. They're native users of that. Oh, I see a question that came in. It says, is the app only on iPad? Nope, this app is for either Android or Apple devices. So I have the same app on my phone. So it can be for any operating system that you've got, either Android or Apple devices. I'm just using an iPad because it's nice and big and you can see the screen a little bit better. Good question though. So that's how I got my LED to turn on. I set it to 100% and I clicked it. And if you guys had a Hummingbird in front of you right now, I would ask you, how does it feel when your light turns on? And because I've taught this workshop a lot, I can tell you that most people say, hooray, it feels like success. Yes, great. So how do you think we'd get our light to turn off? Well, there's 2 ways to do that. Number 1, I could hit the red stop sign. And if you've used a programming language like Scratch before, that red stop sign will look really familiar. And actually, the Hummingbird works with other block-based languages like Scratch. So I'm going to turn my light back on because there's another way to turn your LED off. And that is to grab out another block that says 0 and click that. There we go. Now it's off. So if I wanted to blink my light, I could make it go on, off, on, off, on, off, like that. That's one way to blink a light. But robotics is really all about automation, and that is too much work for me. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to snap those 2 blocks together. And now, when I click the script, that's what we call a line of blocks, now it's going to flash that LED on to 100% for just a fraction of a second, and then turn it off, and then it's going to stop running the script. So you can tell when it's running the script because it glows. See how the blocks glow for a half a tick there? Yeah. So every time I click this block, it'll turn the LED on to 100% and then go off to 0% and then stop because, you know, it's over. Let's say I want it to keep blinking over and over and over and over again. There's a way to do that. We go get a gold control block called Repeat Forever. I'm going to drag that out and put that in the middle of nowhere. Repeat Forever. Not going to attach it. And see how this has a little tail underneath it there? I love block-based coding because color and shape matter, which is great because we're really good at colors and shapes. So this little gray space with the tail underneath it is telling me that I can put stuff in there. So I'm going to put my 2 blue blocks inside of that Repeat Forever, and now I'm going to click it. It's going to glow white, and look at that. My LED is blinking on and off, and it's going really, really, really fast. And that's because that's the speed of the Bluetooth connection of an iPad. Now, if you have like an older phone and you're running this app, or if you have a Kindle Fire, the connection's a little bit slower, but it's still pretty quick. So let's say that like this blinking is like, it's too much for me. Slow down, I'm gonna have a fit. We can slow that down with some wait blocks. So those are also in the gold control blocks. So if I get a gold wait 1 second block and another wait 1 second block, now look at my script. Now I'll move my light a little bit so you can see the script a little better. There we go. So now my LED is turning on to 100%. The computer or the Hummingbird and the iPad are waiting 1 second before they turn it off to 0%. And then they're doing that for 1 second before they go back up and repeat and do the same thing over and over again. So now we've got a light blinking on and off every second. Now for you math teachers out there, I could change this to use some decimals. There we go. Yeah, now we're blinking every half a second, and it's got that instant Bluetooth connection. So it's really rewarding to see that happen. Now, that was just a single color LED. It took us, I explained a lot as we were going there, but I bet you could figure out something similar with how to get a motor to move back and forth. Move this way, wait, move this way, wait, move this way, wait, move this way, wait. Great. So just doing a quick time check here, I do want to show you one other thing with hummingbirds with just the light. So we're just going to do lights today. We're not going to get into motors and sensors because there's a way for you to find how to do those things on our website if you'd like. So the thing I want to tell you is that like blinking lights is something that most robotics tools do. But the reason that I think Hummingbird is really good for a makerspace is that blinking the light is like not even the whole point. What can you do with a blinking light? That's the point. So I'm going to scooch these things off to the side for a second. I'm going to grab a cutting board, like so. Here's my handy dandy cutting board, my handy dandy box cutter. Now, if you have third graders, you might not want them using box cutters. Scissors might be more appropriate for them, or maybe you have a cutting station or something. I'm going to grab a small piece of cardboard, like so. And I'm going to show you a hack to do with an LED. So let's say I've got this LED here, and cool, I want to put it in a project. I want to make a stoplight and like put it through a cup. So let's say I have a cup like this. There we go. And I want to like attach it on there. Well, I could just kind of like tape it on there. But like, oh, I want it to like go through the cup like that. Here's a cool hack to be able to do that. So if you just take your piece of cardboard and you cut a little X in the cardboard like that, then let me show you how easy it is to mount an LED. So now I've got a little X cut in my cardboard. I'm going to bring my Hummingbird back over here. I'm actually going to unplug this light. I did that by just pushing down the buttons and pulling out the wire. And then I'm going to feed my wires through that little X on here. Like that. I'm actually going to use my poking tool to poke through there a little bit. And I'm going to feed it through wires first rather than LED bulb first. So I'm going to feed that through here. There we go. All right, and now when I feed it through, once I push that in, see how snugly that fits? So no hot glue, no tape or anything needed. And then if I just plug my LED back in, it's still running that program because I haven't changed my program on Bird Blocks at all. So it's still going to blink for me. Oops. Wire got a little snarly. There we go. So now I've got a blinking LED in a piece of cardboard. Cool. But also like the joy of Hummingbird is like, all right, I have a light blinking. I've made it into something kind of, but not really. It's kind of not really a thing yet until I'm going to make a very scary character. There we go. He's got a nice thick neck. This is going to be Shrek the Ogre. And he's got one Cyclops Eye right there. Yeah. And I'm going to give him a nice like shirt. Now you don't have to be great at art. I mean, obviously I am. This is the best ogre you've ever seen. Let's be real. But you don't have to be great at art to make something. You just have to make something. Actually, my ogre is a pretty friendly little ogre. I should give him pants. This is a school. Okay, there we go. He is all ready for the first day of school. And we'll give him a nice little, there we go. Look at there. I now have a ready for my first day of school ogre ready to go. And this is a little Cyclops Eye. So the joy of Hummingbird for me and for my students was, okay, I can blink a light, but why do I care? Well, because I want to make something. That's why I care, because I care what I'm making and I care how that turns out. And you could even take some of those same concepts and do something like, do you see up there, there's a map of the United States and there's some lights moving up the map. That's actually an interactive map of butterfly migration patterns for monarch butterflies. So I have a friend who's really interested in butterflies and she was telling me about this one night and I kind of went down a Google rabbit hole on butterflies and I learned that it actually takes 3 generations of monarchs to get from Mexico, where they sleep in the winter, all the way up to Canada. And it takes the first generation to get from Mexico to like mid-Mexico to North Mexico. The second generation is right around the southeast United States. And then the third generation makes it all the way up to Canada. And so I indicated that when I made that map. with 3 different colors of lights. There's red lights for the first generation, yellow lights for the second generation, and green lights for the third generation. And all that is using lights. It's using this little hack about how to mount a light to a piece of cardboard, and my knowledge, the thing that I was interested in learning about, that's something as a teacher that you could say, we're doing an interactive map project. So that's actually what I would like to show you right now. So we've seen how easy it is to program something with Hummingbird, how simple it is to build something with Hummingbird. It's got that low floor, but it's also got that high ceiling in terms of both the, you can do really complex things with code. I don't know if you can see Harry Potter back there. He's sort of slowly looking around. We did that using some variables. So you can do some really complex things with math. You don't have to. But it's also got that high ceiling in terms of like, or Mitch Resnick, who's one of the inventors of Scratch, calls it wide walls. So that's got that low floor, the high ceiling, and wide walls, because that's a social studies project. That's Abe Lincoln. That's a social studies project. This is a math project. I can't think of what you've used to call angles right now, to measure angles. Protractor, haha, protractor. That's a math project. This one is an awesome little social studies project. The Hummingbird has a compass inside of it. There's so many features that I won't have time to go over today. But this robot, whenever I turn it on, it will turn itself to face west and travel west. So this is a go west young robot, little covered wagon. All kinds of fun and cool things. Let me show you where to find all that stuff. So if I hit this view right here, very cool. And I go to our webinar here, to our Google Doc. Done. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so we can see it a little better. So we've talked about what is a makerspace, what is a robot, and we can actually go to our BirdBrain website right here. So I don't know, Jenna, if you would drop that Google Doc in there one more time, just in case anybody needs it. And so these things are linked in the Google Doc as well, but if you go to Get Started, you can find all of the resources that I've talked about today. So you would choose your, I'll zoom out a little bit more so we can, there we go, get the full experience. You choose your robot that you've got. Now, maybe, excuse me, we've been using the Hummingbird Bit today, but we have 2 other things as well. The Hummingbird Duo is an older type of Hummingbird. That one's been out for about 5 years or so, and up until January of this year, that was the only kind of robot. But the new one, the new Hummingbird Bit, does more stuff, and it comes in a nice, better packaging. It's got better learning materials, and it's cheaper. So if you don't have any Hummingbirds, you should definitely go with the new one. Or there's the Finch robot, which you might see up behind me on the shelf here. You would choose your device that you're programming on. So we were using an iPad, but you can see there's all these other options that I talked about. So for example, I'm on a Windows machine. So if I chose Windows, I could use the programming language MakeCode or Snap or Python or Java, which are text-based coding languages. So if you're in a computer science class, or if you've got a computer science teacher, they could take these Hummingbirds into their classroom to teach their concepts as well. But I'm going to go back and select iPad, because that's what we were using today. And you'll see the only option for an iPad is Bird Blocks. So I'm going to select Bird Blocks, and then you go to Get Started. So what that does is it opens up this, it opens up like the Bird Blocks landing page. And so the landing page filters out all of the information that you don't need. So you don't need stuff about MakeCode, you don't need things about tethering this, you don't need that or that. You just need the information that's pertinent to Bird Blocks. So if we go into Program, there are 4 tabs: Program, Build, Teach, and Resources. So Program, what we've done with these video tutorials is we have tried to make a really innovative way to learn that teachers could use to teach themselves, and that they can also use to help in the classroom with students as well. So we've tried to make this really modular and non-sequential. Those are 2 of our guiding principles. So we tried to make it modular because my personal life philosophy, and also BirdBrain's philosophy, is that you should not have to know everything to do something. You should not have to know everything about robotics to do something, to blink a light, right? So the first module is a setup module, so we'll show you how to set up your iPad and set up your Hummingbird to do that. But then if I go into single color LED, you'll see we've got a little blinking LED there. We've got a close-up shot on that blinking LED. And then I really like this, Matt, who's joining us on the call today, he showed you like a simple project that you could make with just LEDs. I mentioned some of those today too. There was a map project. He's got a map of active volcanoes in Hawaii, etc. But when you get in here, we show you first how to plug in an LED. So you don't have to just know that. There's a video that'll teach you how to do it. And then we show you which blocks to drag out. So we've got a screen cap here, and you can see exactly which blocks they drag out to do this. And then I'm going to go here to the second to last video. I love this one because it's a side-by-side of the run of the program. So just like I was pointing out, okay, we're going to go to 100, and then we're going to wait a half a second, and then we're going to go to 0, and we're going to wait a half a second. We have that for you here as well. And then the last one, the last video is always a little challenge. So this challenge is write a program that makes the LED blink faster. You'll have to use decimal points. Ooh, right? So we've got a module like that for each of the components of your Hummingbird kit. We just went over the single color LED, but there's also tricolor LEDs. There's the LED screen, which is this thing right here on your microbit. I mentioned it's a 5x5 LED screen. You can get words to scroll across. You can send messages to your friends across their room. You can make a little like beating heart, things like that. So the LED screen, I'll go back here. There's the position servo, which is like the arm behind me. That one's using a position servo or the protractor. There's a rotation servo, which is like what we would use for the wheels for the oxen on the covered wagon. Those make really good wheels. And there's even a buzzer, so you can get your Hummingbird to play songs out of it. It's got a little buzzer in it. So those are all the outputs. But remember, when we talk about robotics, robotics also involve sensing, right? So we just did one output today. We just did lights as an output. But in order to be a real robot, it's got to sense as well. So the sensors that are included in your Hummingbird are the 4 sensors that we talked about, right? Your light sensor, distance sensor, dial, and sound sensor. But then there's also things that are built into the Hummingbird. I talked about the compass. It's also got an accelerometer, so it knows when it's being tilted. So you could do things like my little LB back here, my little bot. I've done a program where we've programmed as we tilt the Hummingbird around, we get our Harry Potter to look around with it, so you can do cool things with puppetry. It's got an accelerometer, and it's also got those buttons, so those AB buttons, and this is really cool, it's got a radio function, or the ability to control multiple devices together. So in your Hummingbird, inside of it, it's got this radio function, and I don't mean like radio like la la la, like Ariana Grande, like radio. I mean, these Hummingbirds can talk to each other. So you can create like an intranet among them where I could push a button on this Hummingbird, and a Hummingbird 20 feet away, if you made a dragon out of cardboard, your cardboard dragon could activate 20 feet away. And you can connect as many Hummingbirds into that network as will fit in about a 20-foot radius. So even though there are only like 4 motor ports on here, you connect 2 Hummingbirds together, now you've got 8 motors, or 12, or 16, or 24, and you can get really complicated with your robot if you want to. You don't have to. Low floor, high ceiling, right? So those are all the programming tutorials. If I go back here, there's also this great build page. So on the build page, we've got things like mechanisms. So this cable system will probably look familiar. That's what we used to make our finger for our hand, was a string and straw cable system. We've got some simple robots. You'll see little bot is on there. One of my favorites is the tiny drummer. This guy's so funny. He's just a piece of cardboard, a craft stick, and a cup. And now you've got a music connection, right? He's so funny. So this is a little like minute, 2-minute long video. Matt shows you what you need to make it, and then he makes it with you. And so if you follow at BirdBrain Tech on Twitter or on Instagram or anything, we're always tweeting out funky things that people have done to the tiny drummer or the little bot, like interesting takes that they have on that. So I'll go back to build. So there's mechanisms, there's simple robots, and then there are these Hummingbird hacks. So one of the ones that I showed you today was how to cut an X in a piece of cardboard and mount an LED into your robot. So these are helping teachers. Some teachers are really afraid of the coding, and they're like, oh, they're a little nervous about what coding is going to be like. Some teachers in the workshops that I teach are scared of those craft boxes. That's what intimidates them. So this build page is really meant to help those teachers find what they need to be able to build with Hummingbird as well. So now I'm going to show you the teach page, and this I think is where things really, really open up for teachers. So on this teach page, there are over 60 different projects that teachers have made with Hummingbird. And you could even filter those to different grade bands and different subject areas. Let's take a look inside one of them so you can see what one example is. So Robot Shakespeare, I was a middle school English teacher. It speaks to my heart. I can't help it. So what we do in these teach pages, we have a video of the student's work, which I'm going to play for you in just a second. Underneath, we have the objectives and learning goals. So what was that teacher trying to teach? What was she trying to do in her classroom? And the standards that she aligned to. And you'll notice some of these are computer science standards, but there's actually a bunch of ELA and literacy standards in here because she was using creative robotics to deeply teach literacy. Underneath those standards, and those are like state standards, so they're going to be different. I think this teacher was here in Pennsylvania, but they can kind of transfer between states, so it gives you a place to start. Underneath, she's got her lesson procedures, where she tells you about the project, and she even has videos of her students' assessments here, which is really cool. So let's take a look at this student project right here. So these were 8th graders. And they had to read Romeo and Juliet, and then each group got a different scene, and they had to recreate that scene in a shoebox. They had to read the dialogue of the scene and align and sync up their robotics project with their dialogue that they'd recorded.
Good stuff. At night, beyond the window breaks. It is the east, and Juliet is the sun.
But if you chose piercing, you have wood or potatoes for us.
Visit the night before some festival to an impatient child that hath new robes, and may not wear them. Oh, here comes my nurse, and she brings news, in every tongue that speaks, but Romeo's name speaks heavenly eloquent.
I love that one actually, because that one they synced up. Oh, here comes my nurse, and her, like the nurse's head goes like it comes in, and it's kind of funny, which is great because the nurse in Romeo and Juliet is actually the comedic relief. So like those kids understood that scene, right? So that's all on our teach page. And again, there are over 60 different projects all on the teach page that I highly recommend that you go in and explore, that you find one that aligns with your grades that you're interested in, or that you're with your subject that you're interested in, just to see what other teachers have done with Hummingbird. And then the last page that I want to point out with our last minute here is the resources page. So, okay, there's all these great online resources, but here is where you find all the printable instructional resources. So there's a lesson plan on there called Your First Hour of Robotics, where we'll teach you as the teacher to teach your first time with robotics. What do I do that first day? We recommend that you teach lights and motors and do a small project like the tiny drummer. And we've got an explicit lesson plan step by step with like cheat code on there so that you can see what that coding would look like for your students. And also we've got this really powerful tool called the coding cards. These are printable little cards that align with the online programming tutorials. So let's take a look at the ones for Bird Blocks. They're full-size sheets, but they're cut in half. And so on one side of the half sheet, it's got how and where to plug in the component, like a single LED. And then on the back, that's what's pictured here. It shows you how to program it and gives you that same little challenge. So if you're looking for a printable thing, what I like to do with these is print them off, cut them in half, laminate them, put them on a key ring, and then put one set with each type of, with each Hummingbird kit. So the last thing I want to leave everybody with as we're taking off today is that there are lots of ways for you to engage with hummingbirds, to try them out in your makerspace. So at the bottom of that Google Doc, IDEA has a bunch of really powerful ways to engage. Number one, they have, and the most important one is the reason I was in Peoria over the summer is that I trained a bunch of teachers so that they could teach you Hummingbird. So there are about 30 teachers spread out around the state of Illinois, seated across your state, ready to teach this to you and your fellow teachers, ready to help you host an event. Let's say you wanted to do a more informal event, like a Bots and Bevs. I can show you a video of that. There's a video of that linked in your Google Doc. But if you want to do some kind of cool event, talk to Amber. I put her email address in there. Talk to her because they can help you host professional development, get your PD hours for that, all that kind of stuff. IDEA as a network can help support you to do that. I also put my contact information on here and BirdBrain's contact because if you'd like to borrow one of these kits for a demo, we can let you borrow one of these kits for up to 2 months so that you could try it in your classroom as a station. You could try it at your after school program, try it with some of those kids that you're interested in trying it with. So you could borrow one of those. Or if you have any questions about curriculum integration, if you've got a project idea and you want to talk it over with me, I have that classroom teacher experience and a lot of experience with this coding and robotics stuff as well to help you bring creative robotics into your makerspace at home. So does anybody have any, if anybody has any questions, I know we're about at the end of our time here, but if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask Amber or myself or Jenna from IDEA. We would be happy to help you think through your makerspace and plan it out so that you can get what you want out of your makerspace. So thank you so much to IDEA for having me today. I've had a really fun time. It actually hasn't felt like talking to myself, which has been great. It's been nice to see people kind of interacting on the chat screen there. So thank you so much, Jenna. I'll turn it back over to you.
Awesome. That was so awesome. Thank you, Kelsey. I absolutely love that room. It's just so fun. So I wanted to just thank you very much for helping today and for doing this presentation. We had a lot of very engaged people, so that was exciting. I am putting in the chat window right now the link for everybody's PDHs. Again, if you record your attendance by midnight tonight, just go to that bit.ly link that will you can get your 1 hour PDH for that for today. And tomorrow I will be sending out the recording of today's webinar. So look for that email to come through. I will also be posting it to our website under the Learn tab. We've got a Wednesday webinar, and it will include this webinar as well as any of the ones that we've done recently. And I think that's it. Again, as Kelsey said, if you have any questions, information for contact is in the Google Doc, which you all have. So please make sure that you keep a copy of that. And that's all. So if you have any questions, pop them in the Google chat or in the chat window. We will stay on for a few more minutes. Otherwise, thanks for joining us today, and keep an eye out for more Wednesday webinars coming up. We do have some scheduled for the end of October that we'll be promoting shortly. So thank you.
Yeah, and I can stick around for a couple minutes too. If anybody has a question that they'd like to verbalize with, unmute yourself and verbalize, I'm here for that as well. You can stick it in the chat window or, say, hi, I'm Alex T. So-and-so. I have a question for you. That's okay too.
There are a few questions coming in. How many students can work with the Lender Kit?
Yeah, so we recommend that between 2 and 4 students work on a project together. And that's for a couple of different reasons. One, research tells us that pair programming is the best way to learn programming because the students aren't just engaged with the screen, they're also engaged with each other, and they're like putting this knowledge through their language center, and it helps them encode that better. But also when you get to make something a little bit more complicated than my beautiful ogre, when you get to make something a little bit more involved, more hands make light work. So we recommend 2 to 4 students work together on whatever project you're doing. If it's something more simple, like the bee waggle dance or the tiny drummer or something like that, maybe more like 2 students. If it's something more complicated, like this awesome owl back here or the elbow, I think that was 4 or 5 students working in those groups together. Yeah, good question.
Okay, and then somebody also asked, are these compatible with Chromebooks?
Yes, indeed. I have taught many a workshop on Chromebooks. The language that I would recommend that you use if you're using a Chromebook is called MakeCode. It's a free language, and it's totally online, which is awesome. You don't have to put any software on anything, which is really great. So most of the workshops that I do at like conferences, those like 1-hour workshops, people will bring their own technology. They'll like bring their own computers or Chromebooks, and MakeCode works really, really well. It's totally online, and it's a really strong, cool coding language. It looks almost exactly like Bird Blocks, but it just functions a little bit differently. You can do a lot of stuff with MakeCode. Yeah. These two is.
Somebody wants to know where you got your owl mug.
Oh, I'm in a co-working space today, and I don't know. I just found it in the kitchen upstairs, and it was too cute. So I think
it needs to stay in the studio.
I know. I think it belongs here. I thought so too. Thank you. I thought it was a good design choice. I think I stole it from a coworker. So here's just.
It's BirdBrain blue too.
Right? It's like I planned it. Thank you for all of the kind words about our studio too. We've been working really hard on this for a couple months to transform this room that formerly was not this into this, and we're really excited about what it can do for educators and for students. You know, what would this look like if all of you had a kit in front of you, and we had a couple hours, and everybody was plugging in their lights, and you said, "Oh, my light's not blinking. How come?" And you hold it up to the camera, and I say, "Oh, your wires are backwards," right? So thinking about, oh, that's a great question. Somebody just asked, is BirdBrain a CPS vendor? So we're actually working with IDEA. Currently, we are not a CPS vendor. However, we're working with IDEA because IDEA is a CPS vendor. And so we're actually discussing terms about that this week coming up. So if you are part of the Chicago public school system and you want to get some of this stuff in your classroom, you would want to talk to Amber about that. Go ahead and email her, and that her name and email address and stuff is in that Google Doc. So email Amber about that, and she can get you set up with the hardware because IDEA is a CPS vendor. How do you request a lender kit? Email me. So I see somebody's copied my email address on there. Great. You can just email Kelsey at birdbraintechnologies.com and say, hey, I saw you in the IDEA webinar. I'd love to borrow a kit, and I will get you hooked up with a 2-month loan. Hey, there's our email addresses in there. Yeah, so Kelsey at birdbraintechnologies.com and then A. Hefner at ideaillinois.org. Those are the people you'd contact. Oh, for someone who's just tuning in, yes, Jenna from the IDEA Network just let us know that she will be sending out the link to the recording of this webinar tomorrow. So if you are the person who's just joining us, she's going to send out a link to the recording of this to everybody who registered tomorrow. So you'll have that in your inbox. Something to look forward to on a Thursday. One last little piece of information, I didn't cover this, but we generally recommend hummingbirds for about 3rd and 4th grade and up as far as students go. That's partially because of the fine motor skills needed to like plug in a light, but also in terms of the coding language. It uses like numbers and percentages, so you've got to be able to read some really basic stuff if you want to be able to code with a hummingbird. So we generally recommend that for about 3rd and 4th grade and up. However, the Finch, which is behind me there, that has a coding language that's not even, there's text-based, right? There's block-based, and then there's icon-based programming. So if anybody's still sticking around, you should feel free to stick around because I'm going to show you something kind of cool. So in icon-based programming languages, this language that goes with the Finch is called Finch Blocks. And so you see it's kind of similar. It's got blocks to it, but there's no words, and there's no numbers. So if I want my finch to roll forward, so if I grab my finch here, okay. Now this finch, I have to apologize for the state of him. He is this is a 3D printed prototype of a finch, so it looks kind of junky. The real finches will look much nicer, but this one, as you can see, is kind of a little bit rough. Our 3D printer was having some emotional troubles when it was printing our finch. So here's my finch right here. There we go. So it's turned on. All right, and I can do the same sort of thing. It's flashing 3 numbers on, or 3 letters on there. So I can connect my finch. Put that there, and I'll put little Finchy here. So I could drag this icon here, and if I click this, you'll see he goes forward. If I have it go instead, go turn, let's see, I think I want it to turn that way. If I click my thing, it'll turn. There we go, ta-da. You can also do things with the finch's nose color and tail color. So I'm going to take that turn block out of there. There we go. So the nose went green, the tail went blue. This is icon-based programming languages. So this is for absolute beginners, pre-readers, pre-K, kindergarten, first grade. But Finch Blocks is actually also leveled. So this is level 1, no words, no numbers, just icons. Level 2 looks like this. So you'll see when you get into level 2 that now you can control how far it goes. So let's say you want it to go forward 10 centimeters, or you know what, actually I want it to go forward 20 centimeters. So now, I'll scooch this a little bit. Now Finch is going to go forward 19 centimeters. There we go. And if I want it to turn, it could turn 90 degrees. Now watch this icon over here. Or it could turn, I want it to go 180 degrees. Let's scooch it back just a little bit, 180 degrees. And so now, if I click that icon, I'll drag this one out and put that back. Now, if I want it to go 180 degrees, now it'll turn all the way around. And so we're starting to build that angle knowledge. And also, let's say I want to control the color of the finch's tail blocks, but I don't want it to just be blue. I want it to be pink, right? Not a meaningful creative choice by itself, but meaningful when I get to program it, right? So now, haha, the tail lights on the finch can turn pink. Very cool. And level 3 is even a little bit more advanced than that. It's even got some more controls than that. Although that's still in beta and it's not very nice looking, so I'm not going to show you that one today. But for Finch, this is like this guy. He's got some wheels. He's got lights. He's got a sensor, that distance sensor there. It's got line following capabilities. It's got line sensors in the top of, or light sensors, excuse me, in the top of it. And the hole, that's for a marker. If you've got like a Crayola washable marker, you can put a marker right in there, and it sits right in between the 2 wheels, and so you can draw with your finch as he kind of rolls around. You can really talk about circles and angles and squares and things like that. So although we recommend Hummingbird for about 3rd and 4th grade and up, this is a true K-12 tool because it can go from icon-based programming to block-based programming to text-based programming. So this is something that could be used across an entire district. So we're totally over time now, but I think that is really cool for Finch. I think Finch is about the only tool out there that can go from icon to block to text-based in the same tool without having to do anything crazy, any crazy modifications to it. So